Miami Dolphins are wrapping OTAs this week before mini camp next week. As we get ready for the final stages of the offseason program, let's take a look at the Dolphins' 53-man projection starting today on the offensive side of the football.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We're going to zoom out to a macro view of the Dolphins today on the show. I have a current 53-man roster projection. And the good news is I only have one vacant spot on the Dolphins 53-man roster projection, and it's not one of the names that we're going to get to today. We have a 25 and 25 split between the offensive and defensive side of the football. I want to talk about each one of these rooms, who I currently have as the guys that are in, and who are some of the hard decisions for names that ultimately did not make the cut for this early June 53 forecast for the Dolphins. So we're going to start in the offensive backfield, and we will do quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive tackles, and interior offensive line. So let's get underway, starting with quarterbacks. You guys know the drill by now. It's an unfortunate reality for the Miami Dolphins. You're not a team that's going to be afforded the chance to carry two quarterbacks on a 53-man roster with the durability and health, frequency of health pop-ups for Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa, Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers, all three of those quarterbacks do make this cut at the quarterback position. The only one that is cut in this scenario is the fourth quarterback, Brett Gabbert, who was signed sometime in May. He is affiliated, he's related to Blaine Gabbert, but Brett played at Miami of Ohio and went undrafted. This year he's an undrafted rookie, and I would generally expect he's going to be there for probably the first week or 2 weeks of training camp to kind of do the load management stuff with the drills and throwing and keeping everybody's arms fresh. And then Miami, when they have opportunities to maybe add more players to the roster, he's probably going to be pretty low in the pecking order. So not a lot of difficult decision-making to be had at quarterback. It was more so we have to commit a third roster spot at the quarterback position because of what the Dolphins have been exposed to the past couple of seasons, or at least in the majority of the past couple of seasons, with interruptions to play at the quarterback position. So Tua, Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers, all three of them are on my June 53-man forecast for the Dolphins roster. Running back / fullback, because Alec Ingold's going to make this group. I have three running backs plus a fullback, Achane, Jalen Wright, and Ollie Gordon with Alec Ingold. Obviously, Alexander Mattison was brought to Miami on a one-year deal at vet minimum, so there's not a lot invested in here for Alexander Mattison. I think the draft selection and the potential of Ollie Gordon is going to be enough to kind of bump Mattison off. I just think there's ceiling that you can lean into with Gordon. And let's be honest, too. You're a team that is in the midst of kind of building up the next nucleus for what your next chapter is going to look like. It behooves you to put rookie contracts that have 4 years of cost control on the roster as compared to Alexander Mattison, who is a 26-year-old back on a one-year deal who spent the last 3 seasons now with 3 different teams. It was Minnesota, and then it was Las Vegas, and now it's Miami. Mattison, I think, would be a sturdy, very role-specific kind of player. But the fact that they landed Gordon, who can do the same thing as a big-bodied back, and has that physical element and the untapped potential of Jalen Wright. And I didn't find myself comfortable in a position to keep 4 running backs plus a fullback. So it prompted me to bump Mattison off, which was not an easy decision, but I think is the right decision. Now, the Ingold decision kind of trickles down to tight ends. But I think you see a pretty clear delineation between the styles of tight ends that the Dolphins currently have on the roster. And that was another compounding factor for me, where in a perfect world, if you didn't have a roster spot to commit to a fullback, you would have more flexibility for either another back or either another tight end or potentially another receiver. Because obviously you kind of have 12 spots, typically some distribution across all of your skill players to have 12, somewhere around 12, give or take 1 or 2. And Miami, obviously, let's not forget, they went into the season last year when they did their original cut at the end of training camp. They carried 4 wide receivers, and then they had a waiver claim, and then they kind of juggled some spots, and they put their players on injury lists, and they kind of fell into some more names, but they started with 4 wide receivers on the active 53 and then tried to pick it up from there. So you have some fluidity. Ingold plus Ewers takes away some other spots. And that's why in a lot of these other spots along the roster, be it the offensive line or the defensive line or your defensive backs, it becomes paramount, I think, to have a lot of versatility with those other players and having positional flexibility with your offensive linemen, because you have an antiquated position that you kind of lean into with a roster spot in Ingold. And yes, he can do some tight end stuff, but he's not an inline tight end, and he's not a pass catcher you're going to put out in the slot or put in an H-back and ask him to run routes and create separate. He's just not that kind of player, right? So you have that role, and then you have to carry a third quarterback. The domino effect, you're going to feel it throughout the rest of this. We're going to go to pass catchers next here on Locked on Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, and whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on all of the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you like free money, you can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet with FanDuel hits. If you're a real sicko out there, they actually have a spread for the Hall of Fame game, which we're less than 2 months away from, by the way. That game will be played on July 31st. Lions favored by 1.5 over the Chargers. There's some good NFL futures. The Dolphins are plus 550 to win the AFC East if you're feeling lucky. But that first $5 bet with FanDuel, if it hits, you can get $200 in bonus bets. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you do get those $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wide receiver, I settled on 5. I would have liked to find a 6th. But when you get into some of the stuff that we just talked about, and then you get into tight ends, where there's varying skill sets and varying degrees of skill available and role available. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, who they signed on the 2-year deal. Malik Washington obviously was an emergent player for you last year. That's, I think, your core 4. Those are the 4 you should expect to have predominantly offensive contributions to the team. Wanted some size. Didn't find size for the 3rd spot or the 5th spot, because it would have been either Theo Weiss or Andrew Armstrong, or I know Monterey Baldwin's a speedy, undersized guy. Watched his tape. He can obviously fly. He's good down the field type player, but the catch point stuff for him is really inconsistent. D. Eskridge, kind of just a special teams guy. You managed to stash Taj Washington. I went back a couple weeks ago, watched a little bit more Taj at USC. I gave Taj Washington the 5th spot. It was not easy to sort out. But I think how the Dolphins have handled Eric Ezukama to this point is probably an indicator that if you're holding your breath, that the light bulb's going to turn on for Eric Ezukama. They cut him last year, right? And then he was back on the practice squad. But they went out and got size and then paid handsomely for some of these UDFAs that if they make the practice squad, they effectively fronted some of the practice squad salary for some of these guys. So Tyreek, everybody's been wondering, is he going to generate a market? I think if there is a market to be had for Tyreek Hill, it's probably going to be in season if the Dolphins start very poorly and they find themselves sellers at the trade deadline. But for opening day in a 53 to start, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Nick Westbrook-Akine is kind of the big-bodied player out of this group. And then the rest of your size, you're going to have to lean into. Spoiler alert, I don't have the Dolphins trading Jonnu Smith. Then you have Malik Washington, Taj Washington. That's the 5. I really wanted to find a spot for Andrew Armstrong. Couldn't find it. D. Eskridge, I could see why they would keep from a special teams perspective. But Taj, again, it gets back to the economics of player control and appeal and looking for guys who emerge that you have a longer leash with. And D. Eskridge, is never really going to be a player that's going to cost you a lot of money, but he's 28 years old versus Taj Washington, who's 24 and is on a rookie contract for several seasons. Like that's all ammunition in his corner when it comes down to we are managing the roster this year, but we're also managing cost and longevity and outlook and what gives us the most flexibility long-term. So then cutting Washington to then maybe stick around and then get put on the practice squad. And then you surrender the 4 years of control that you have on that contract. Tight end. Jonnu Smith, Pharaoh Brown, Julian Hill, Jalen Conyers. These are the 4. So I have 4 running backs or 4 backs, 3 quarterbacks, 5 wide receivers, and 4 tight ends. The Jonnu Smith thing, I'm not expecting that to culminate in a trade unless Pittsburgh gets crazy. And I don't expect Pittsburgh to get crazy. They got to figure out their quarterback situation before they do anything. Pharaoh Brown, I just think the floor is higher than Julian Hill. With the guarantee, I think Pharaoh has $20,000 in guaranteed salary, so there's effectively no commitment to Pharaoh. But I do think with what he brings as a pass protector, as a run blocker, as the inline player who's not going out, when you want that talent on the field, I do think he has a higher floor than Julian Hill. Julian, of course, has more cost-controlled leash as a guy who's going into year 3. He'll be a restricted free agent after this season. So there's multiple years of cost control versus Pharaoh Brown is one of the oldest guys on the team. Signed this year on a 1-year deal in free agency. He's 31 years old, right? So the fact that you can keep them both and that's your 1-2 is your Y tight end, I have enough room to keep both. And then Conyers, I'm really buying as a pet project for McDaniel. I think he's got a lot of versatility. He was an emerging player at Texas Tech. I think Mike's really going to like getting his hands on him. He's not guaranteed anything. And as an undrafted free agent, he's one of those, you could tell me they keep 3 and he's on the outside looking in because I liked Hayden Rusi last year, right? But they just didn't have the room and the bodies. So I didn't have a lot of conflict finding the 4. It was a question of, do I keep 4 or do I keep 3 when I was trying to compartmentalize the tight end position? And I'm settling on 4 and leaning into some of the special teams contributions that this room can bring for guys not named Jonnu Smith. And then obviously, I don't think they're trading Jonnu Smith. I think, and there's been some reporting that indicates that there's some interest in figuring this thing out. And that means probably getting a contract extension done in some way, shape, or form. Or you could say, Jonnu, if you want to sit out games and surrender game checks when you're only making 4, go ahead. Like they could very easily play hardball. It's not how I would choose to do it. I also wouldn't choose to give Jonnu Smith the moon, but there's middle ground to be found there somewhere. And fun fact, I just found this out. I just saw this morning on Spot Track. The Miami Dolphins are the only team this year that has not done a single contract extension this offseason. Every other team has done at least one. Now, Indianapolis's one contract extension was like a 1 year, $1 million contract extension. But the Dolphins have done none. And while I think it's very true that they want to protect their long-term flexibility and outlook and not overcommit with pieces from this that might not fit pieces of what they want it to look like in 26 or 27, they've done none. And I don't think doing one or two contract extensions, whether it's Zach Sealer or Jonnu Smith or both now, I don't think doing it with those players surrenders the spirit of what you've tried to attain. It just means you're a lot more selective and you're working hard on the negotiations. So everything that we've said about wanting flexibility and not overcommitting and not deferring finances, and all of that can still be true, even if you do a contract extension or two, because you're the only team as of June 5th who's done none. We're going to get into the offensive line next. Landed on 9. I have 9. And I feel good about most of it. We're going to get into that next here, Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Whether you want to classify some of these guys as inside or outside guys, it's 6 in one hand, half dozen the other. I'm just going to read through the projected 5 and then the 4 backups that I currently have rostered. And this is the spot for me. You can point to wide receiver and say, hey, maybe your 5th wide receiver is not a 7th round draft choice from 2024. Maybe you want somebody with a little bit more special teams appeal, and maybe D. Eskridge is that player. I'd like another physical player, although I'm keeping 4 tight ends, and 2 of them are flex types in Jonnu Smith and Jalen Conyers. So maybe I'm just being redundant there, right? But here's what I have. This is the first room that I look at and say, I'd love to get a name to push one of these guys off the bubble and off, ideally. Patrick Paul, either Jonah Savaianaya or James Daniels. Those are the 2 guards. Aaron Brewer is the center. Austin Jackson's the starting right tackle. So that's your starting 5 in some combination, some way, shape, or form. Larry Borum, who they signed this year on a contract. He will be here. His contract was fully guaranteed. Keon Smith, who they brought back as a restricted free agent, showed some promise. Missed all of last year with a knee injury, suffered in the preseason. He's back. He can play guard or tackle. I think he's a better tackle than he is a guard. Liam Eichenberg as O-lineman 8, and then Andrew Meyer as O-lineman 9. I think there's redundancy with these last 2 guys. Meyer is a young player they invested in last year as an undrafted free agent. Carried him the whole year. Didn't play, but carried him the whole year. He's a center. I don't know that he's got any guard flex, position flex. I know Liam Eichenberg does, and he came back on a 1-year deal that was a veteran benefit, salary benefit contract, which means he gets paid more than what he's owed against the cap because they want to afford teams a couple different tools to incentivize veteran players at the end of rookie contracts, more opportunities to stay on teams and not just get chewed through the grinder through your rookie contract and then fall out. Versus a team saying, well, we'll just get an Andrew Meyer and pay him $840,000 instead of paying Liam Eichenberg $2 million. Well, you pay Liam Eichenberg $2 million, but he only counts for minimum salary against the cap is effectively the spirit of the veteran benefit salary, which is a tool that the CBA put in to benefit players with 4, 5, 6 years of tenure on the team. We've exhausted looking at names that would make some sense in free agency. You've started to see some movement on this front. The Frank Ragnow retirement in Detroit just spurred the Lions to sign Tristan Colon off of free agency. So you've seen that start to pick up. You've seen some contract extensions across the league start to pick up. So that's why I look at a Jonnu Smith. I look at a Zach Sealer, kind of have my eye on some of those kinds of things, especially with mandatory minicamp starting next week. Who shows up? Who doesn't show up? Are you trying to get it done by then? Are you willing to take it that far and see if they push you that far? We'll get a little bit more clarity here. But this is the first spot, these 9 offensive linemen. If you tell me the top 6 is Paul, Jackson, Daniels, Brewer, Savaianaya, Borum, I can go to it this season with that group. Blend of youth, veteran experience, common physical traits of explosiveness and then the ability to play in space, but also having power for the vast majority of that group. Brewer's a smaller center, but that's greatest center of all time. Might be Jason Kelsey, right? He was like 290 pounds. Like, with the right players around him, it's a non-issue. And I don't think the Dolphins had the right players around him last year as starters. And ironically, a year after they probably did have the right players around him, what he would have had. But of course, it was Connor Williams then. All those guys got hurt. Of course they did, right? But the 7 spot being either Keon Smith or Liam Eichenberg. Give me an O-line 7. I can deal with the rest of it above that and feel good about the group as a young group. It has the traits that they need to be successful within the scheme and what you want to do, but also gives you a little bit more versatility. If Keon Smith is O-lineman 8 and Liam Eichenberg is O-lineman 9, I'm fine with that composition of a group. So I think you're missing one still. I'd like to see one. Maybe it's a waiver claim. Maybe it's somebody gets cut off another team. Maybe it is a Daniel Brunskill. Whatever that looks like, that's what I have for my 25 players to go on the offensive side of the football right now. Tagovailoa, Wilson, Ewers at quarterback 3, Achane, Wright, Gordon, Ingold in the backfield 4, Waddle, Hill, Westbrook, Akine, and both the Washingtons from the 24 class, 5 wide receivers, Jonnu Smith, Pharaoh Brown, Julian Hill, Jalen Conyers, 4 tight ends, 9 offensive linemen, Paul, Daniels, Brewer, Savaianaya, Jackson, Larry Borum, Keon Smith, Liam Eichenberg, Andrew Meyer. Tomorrow, we're going to go over the defensive side of the ball and the conflicts that I had in making decisions there. So I hope you'll come back and see us tomorrow on the show. Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Make it a great rest of your Thursday. We get any news, we'll be back. If not, I'll talk to you all again tomorrow for the defensive side of the ball.